In this video, we'll create a responsive Parallax website from scratch using HTML5 and CSS3. So let's take a look at it here before we get started. At the top of the website, you'll see that we have some heading text where it says Parallax on top of this 100% height and 100% width image. Then as we scroll down through the website, we'll find that we have a couple of headings here followed by a 2-column section with paragraphs. Then we have our next fixed image Parallax background with the fireworks text, followed by a dark section with a heading, paragraph text, then our next Parallax image, followed by another 2-column block of text, and then our last image here that also takes up 100% of the height and 100% of the width. Now let's go ahead and scroll up to the top of the website, then take a look at the mobile version for how it's going to appear on an iPhone 10 off to the right here. So as you can see, our heading text has resized. Then we have single columns here where it used to be 2 columns on the desktop version. And then as we scroll down, we're still going to see 100% of the width and 100% of the height at the image on the bottom and the image at the top of the website. So just to demonstrate how it's always going to fill up the page here, let's go ahead and widen the mobile version here. And as you can see, even though it's not that tall, it's still going to take up 100% of the width with each one of the photos. Okay, so let's go ahead and X out of this, and then I'll show you what we'll need to get started. In the description of this video will be a free download for the tutorial starter files, so pause the video for a moment and go ahead and download these Parallax website starter files if you need to. Then once you open it, you can open up index.html and style.css in your text editor. I'm going to be using the free program called Sublime Text, and then I'll have index.html open with Google Chrome while we're building our Parallax website. So also included in the website starter files will be all 4 of the images to get us started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this aside, and then let's move over to index.html here, and I'm going to type in a little bit of text just to make sure that we have index.html linked to Google Chrome. Okay, so I'll just write AAA, and then I'll move over to the different tab here, and there we have our text. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get started with our first tag. The first thing that we'll add here will be the outline of our first background image. So let's go ahead and say div class parallax 1, and then drop down and close out the div. And then we'll say div class heading for the parallax text that we see here. So div class heading, and then drop down, and I'm going to write parallax, and then close out the div. Okay, so later in our CSS, we're going to add the background image as well as the styling to the paragraph text. But now if we look at the version we're working on here, we'll just see it say parallax. So now let's drop down to the next section where we have the 2 columns. So we're just going to call this section simply section with the HTML5 tag, and then let's add our heading 1 where it says Parallax website tutorial. So I'm just going to paste it in here inside of an H1 for heading 1, and to speed up the tutorial, I'm going to do a little bit more of pasting with the headings and the paragraph text, but you can just use regular Ipsum dummy text if you want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in between our H3 tags, and then we can start our first of the 2-column sections. So we're going to say div class 2-col, and then drop down and close out the div, and then inside of each 2-column section we're going to have a paragraph. So we'll use the P tag for paragraph, and then I'll just paste in the paragraph text here, and then we can just copy our 2-column section and paste it underneath this one to have both of our columns. So now if we refresh, here we have our heading text as well as both of the paragraphs. So now let's add our second fixed image parallax background section here. So we'll want to name it a different div than the first one since we'll be using a different background image. So we're going to call this Parallax 2 and then drop down and close out the div. And then inside of it, for the fireworks text, we're going to have another heading, and we'll style it differently from the first. So let's say heading-sm for heading small, or for a smaller heading. Okay, and then you can drop down and write fireworks here. Alright, so now if we go and refresh, there we have our fireworks text beneath the paragraph sections. Now let's add our next section here. So we're going to use the HTML5 section tag again, but we're going to give it a class and call it dark to give it the dark background later in style.css. Then you can close out your section tag, and let's add a heading 2 now to add how parallax works, and then a paragraph tag underneath it for this text here. Okay. Alright, so now we have the first of our 2 dark sections done, and there we have our heading 2 and the paragraph. Now let's drop down to our third image, and again we'll want it to be a different class than the first 2, so let's simply call it Parallax 3, and then you can close out the div, and there's nothing on top of that, so we can just leave it like that. And now we can add our next class here, the dark class. So we can use section class dark or div class dark. And then we'll add our heading 3. And then our 2 column sections again. So you can say div class 2 col, and then we'll drop down and close out the div. And then I'll paste in the paragraph text that we see here. Okay, P and then paste. And then we'll just copy our 2 column section like the one we did above and paste it in under this one. Alright, then lastly, now that we have that heading and the paragraphs in, let's go ahead and add our 4th parallax section here. So we'll simply call it div class parallax 4, and then go ahead and close out your div, and we'll have nothing in there, so we can just leave it as that. And that does it for all of our HTML, so we can move over to style.css now and lay out all of our styles for the Parallax website. So I'm going to move over to style.css, and I'm going to size it down a little bit here. Alright, and then the first thing that we're going to style will be the HTML and body section of the website. So this is called a reset style. So we're going to make sure that the browser displays at 100% of its height, that it has 0 margin. And now let's take a look at it. So if we refresh, we're going to get rid of a little bit of space here. Now you can see the text is all the way up to the top left. And then let's say font family, and we're going to use that Google font that's at the top of the screen there called Ubuntu. Okay. And then sans serif is our fallback font. And let's change the line height to space out our paragraph text as well as our heading text a little bit with line height 180%, and then we'll give it a color. Alright, so we're gonna give it a standard gray color, which is the hex value 666, and now if we refresh, it's a light gray there. And let's say text align center for all of our text, and then later in the 2 column sections we can say text align left if we want to make them look like regular paragraph blocks. So now let's go ahead and add our background images for all 4 of our Parallax classes here. So the 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, and since again they're different background images, we'll reference them individually. So let's start with Parallax 1, and we'll give it a background URL. Okay, and then we'll reference our first image. So it's img/first.jpg. Alright. So now if we refresh, there we have a little bit of the image showing up at the top. But what we'll want to do is say min height, for minimum height, 100%. Okay, so there we have it filling up the screen. And we'll take care of the rest of the styling to get it looking like this in just a minute, but let's first add the rest of our background images here. So we'll move on to the Parallax 2 class. So we'll change this to Parallax 2 and then the image to second, and it's going to take up 60% of the screen. Alright, and then there we have it. Then for Parallax 3, we'll just change it to Parallax 3. It's the third image, so third.jpg, and then 40% of our screen. Okay, so we're seeing the top left of that image. And now for our last one, it's going to be Parallax 4, the fourth image. And this one, similar to the first, is going to take up 100%, so we'll leave it at minimum height 100%. Alright, so there we have it. Okay, so now let's drop down and add our next style. So we're seeing the whole image here, and we're going to have it centered also with a little bit of opacity to it. So let's reference Parallax 1, Parallax 2, 3, and then Parallax 4. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to say is position relative, and then we're going to give it an opacity of 0.75 to give it kind of the white faded look. Okay, so now the images have a little bit of a transparency to the white background behind it. Then let's say background position center. So now if we refresh, now it's centered there, but we're still not seeing 100% of the image. So we'll say background size cover. Okay? So now it's starting to look like the original here, but it's still not staying in the same spot. So let's say background repeat, no repeat, and then background attachment fixed. Alright, and then I'll save and refresh. Okay, and now as we scroll down, we'll see that all of the images are staying fixed on the page, and we can see 100% of them. Alright, so the next thing that we'll do is let's go back up to our parallax text that's sitting all the way at the top there, and we'll go ahead and center it and make it larger. So we're going to reference the heading class with dot heading, and then let's say position absolute, and then color white, which is FFF, the hex value, and then font size 550%. Okay, so there we have it, but it's sitting at the top of the page there. So next let's say top 38%, so it's 38% away from the top of our screen. And then let's say width 100% so it's centered on the page. Okay? Alright, good. So now let's take the text and make it uppercase with text transform uppercase. And then let's space it out a little bit with letter spacing 8 pixels. And then lastly, let's add text shadow. So we're going to make it a little bit darker so the white text is more pronounced. So we'll give it a shadow of 10 pixels using the black hex value. So now we have it looking just like the original at the top of the website here. And the next thing that we'll do is let's style our fireworks text here. So that's going to be the second heading where it says div class heading -sm for small. So let's use dot instead of the hashtag since it's a class and not an ID. Heading -sm. Then again we'll say position absolute, top 45%, so it's practically centered here. And then width 100%. Color, we'll make it white again. And then let's give it a font size of 250%. So now if we refresh, there we have it centered for us. And let's again say text transform uppercase and letter spacing 5 pixels. And then text shadow, again we'll give it some text shadow because it's white. We'll say text shadow 0 horizontal and vertical, and then 10 pixels wide with the color of black. Okay, alright, so there we have our heading small text looking like the original. Now let's drop down to our 2-column section. So we'll reference it with .2-col. Let's say float left, so it pushes to the left of the screen. Then we'll give it a width of, actually, right now it's sitting on top of the next image. So let's add a style to our HTML5 section tags here. And let's say section overflow auto, and there we have it, staying within the white section. And then let's give it a width of 42% to leave room for padding on the left and right. So let's say padding 0 top bottom, and then 4% left right. Alright, so there we have it. And then lastly and optionally, we can say text align left. Okay, so there we have our 2-column sections laid out. And let's drop down next to our dark sections here, and let's add some padding to all of our sections so they're a little more spaced out. So let's say padding 50% top bottom, or sorry, 50 pixels, and then 80 pixels left right. Okay, so that looks a little cleaner and spaced out. And we're missing something down here with our 2-column section in div class dark. So let's drop down to the dark class. Okay, so .dark, and let's say overflow auto. Right, so now it's staying within the white section there. And let's give it the same padding with padding 50 pixels top bottom, 80 pixels left right. Okay. And then let's give it its background color. So background color, it's going to be a dark gray shade with the hex value of 323232. And then let's make our color, our text color, off-white at F2, F2, F2. Alright. So the last thing is we don't have our paragraphs the same here. So let's go back to our HTML document and see what we're missing here. Okay. So I forgot to add div class -2col or 2-col. Okay, so there we have it. Okay, so that completes the website for the full width desktop version. So now let's move on over to our media query style to style the mobile version of the website. So I'm going to flex it down here. And what we'll want to do is change the size of our heading text, and we'll also make our 2-column sections 1 column. So we'll start off with media, and then in parentheses max width 768 pixels. So anything under 768 pixels, it will apply these styles to it. And let's style our heading to make it go from 550% down to a 250% font size. Okay, so that's looking better. And then let's go down to our second heading where it says fireworks with .heading -sm, and let's make it a font size of 180% from 250%. Alright. And then let's say .2-col, and then we'll give it a width of 100% and then padding 0. Okay, and then optionally you can make it make the text centered. I think it looks pretty good with centered text on the mobile version. So text align center. So now we have it looking nice and clean, just like the original, and I'm going to go ahead and flex it back up to full width so we can see the media queries change with our heading there. And that does it. I want to thank you for sticking around with me through this tutorial. Please remember to like the video, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Then I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.